Your Human and You. Written by Mad Max the Black. Chapter 14. Your Family and Your Human. Part 1. Twilight awoke to the sound of Spike snoring. While normally sleep apnea was a rather annoying condition to have, she had become accustomed to hearing his growl-like snores throughout the years. She found it surprisingly comforting, letting her know that he was still there and still sleeping peacefully. Pulling herself out of the warm, comfortable embrace of her bed, she yawned loudly, stretching both her legs and wings until they popped gently. Ruffling her feathers gently to try and get them back in their proper place, she silently made her way towards the dresser, trying hard not to wake Spike. It was still fairly early in the morning, and she didn't want to wake him too early. He needed his sleep. He was still a baby dragon after all. Reaching the dresser, she pushed a small amount of magic through her horn. Grasping her mane brush, she lifted into the air and began to brush her mane into a more presentable state. Using the mirror on top of the dresser to see what she was doing, she got her mane as straight as possible. Once that task was done, she returned the brush to the dresser, cutting off the magic flowing through her horn. The brush clattered softly against the hardwood surface. Twilight leaned in close to the mirror, admiring her handiwork. Her eyes narrowed as she noticed her bangs.
It appears that some of my mane is getting rather long,
she thought to herself, eyeing the offending hair with distaste.
Why? That one particular patch is nearly 2 millimeters longer than the rest.
Despite her displeasure, it would have to be for now. She'd have to look through her schedule to see if there was any free time coming up soon, where she could possibly schedule a haircut. Her unfortunate case of bedhead taken care of, Twilight sat quietly by Spike, still sleeping in his little basket. Trotting softly to the bedroom door, she cracked it open and slipped out into the hall, closing the door silently behind her. She walked quickly down the stairs, her hoofs clicking against the wooden floor, the only sound in the early morning silence. Maneuvering the stairs as quietly as possible, she soon arrived in the living room. The entire room had a cozy feeling to it. The curtains were drawn, keeping the morning sun out. The only source of light in the room came from the fireplace, where red embers, evidence of a recent fire, provided warmth as well as a dim light to see by. Summer was slowly coming to an end, and the mornings were becoming chillier and chillier. Twilight had started making sure that there was fire burning each night, just so that the library remained comfortable when temperatures dropped below the acceptable levels. If it got too hot, they could just open a few windows. As Twilight made her way across the room, a loud snore broke the silence. Her eyes quickly snapped at the couch, and it was there that she spied the other inhabitant of the library. Sleeping on the couch, half covered by a wool blanket, was Max. Lying on his back, he had his feet up on the hoof rest on one end of the couch, his head resting on the other. His mouth was open slightly, his breathing even and calm. Every few breaths, a soft snore would issue forth. He looked peaceful, which was good considering recent events. Almost a week ago, he had come dashing up to Twilight's room and dived under her covers in a state of near panic. She had managed to get enough hoof language out of him to understand that something weird was going on down in his room. She had investigated immediately, while Max stayed secured under her sheets. However, she found nothing out of the ordinary. She had even looked in his closet at his insisting, but it looked like an empty closet to her. Just to be sure, she scanned the closet, as well as the entire room with her magic. It came back clean. Nothing was amiss, magical or otherwise. She was pretty sure that Max was just suffering from a bad dream, but he insisted he had been awake at the time. Nevertheless, Max had refused to go back down to the basement, instead electing to sleep on the couch, and there he had slept for the past several days. Twilight didn't really care where her human slept, as long as he was comfortable. And, judging by the way he looked right now, she hazarded a guess that he was pretty comfortable on her couch. As she watched, Max's foot twitched slightly, evidence of him dreaming. She smiled to herself as she watched him, as she watched her human. She felt a slight tingle when she thought that.
My human.
Twilight didn't have a human growing up. Her parents didn't think that one was a necessary addition to her family, and she never pushed the matter. As she grew, even though she never truly understood the fascination with them, her curiosity about them had grown. She had always wondered what it would be like to have a human, but never had a chance to actually pursue the thought. Even after she moved to Ponyville, she had never actually considered buying a human. Then Princess Celestia had sent her human of her own. Not just any human, though. She had sent Twilight Max, and her life had changed. All thanks to her human. Her human was special. Her human was handsome. Her human was intelligent. Her human was caring and kind and understanding. Her human was from a different world. Twilight squealed eternally as she felt her heart fluttering at the very thought. A different world. It had been nearly impossible for her to believe that Max was intelligent at first, let alone from a different world entirely. However, after everything he had told her about his world, Twilight had no choice but to believe him. No pony could have made anything like that up the top of their head, and his details were consistent. And what details they were! To think that humans could come up with such technological advances. It shouldn't be possible, but neither should Max. An intelligent human. Simply marvelous. Another snore from the sleeping human snapped Twilight back to reality. Chuckling softly to herself, she made her way over to the curtain windows. Pushing a small amount of magic through her horn, she grasped the curtains in her magic and yanked them open quickly. Immediately, the light from Princess Celestia's glorious sun burst through the window, brightening the room. The sudden attack of light caused Max to wake up with a startled yelp. His eyes snapped open, only to shut almost immediately afterward as his sensitive eyes were assaulted. Hissing, he grasped at the wool blanket and dragged it up, over his head. Twilight giggled at his antics. Approaching the couch, she poked at his hidden form with a huff.
Good morning, Max.
She chirped cheerfully.
It's time to get up and seize the day.
Max squirmed under the blanket as she continued to prod him, causing her to giggle again. A muffled growl came from the blanket, followed by his response. I hate mornings.
Come on, you.
She chastised, prodding him one last time.
Early to bed and early to rise makes a mare healthy, wealthy, and wise.
There was some movement under the blanket, and then Max's hand emerged, his fist closed. He raised his middle digit in Twilight's direction, leaving it there for several seconds, and the hand then withdrew back into the hidden depths of the blanket, the raised digit still standing proud. This wasn't the first time that Twilight had seen him use that strange gesture, but she still didn't fully understand what it meant. Taking into account the different situations that he used it in, however, she could summarize that it probably wasn't anything good.
Fine then.
She huffed a small smile, touching her lips.
I'll be downstairs making breakfast when you decide to be civilized.
Spinning around, she trotted off the stairs and headed down to the ground floor, leaving behind a grumbling pile of blanket. Making her way to the kitchen, Twilight lit up her horn and began pulling pots and pans out of the cupboards. Despite the popular belief amongst her friends, she was a decent cook. Not as good as Spike, though. When it came down to Spike and her, he would always be the better chef, but she could handle herself fairly well in the kitchen.
Seriously, one little incident and every pony thinks that I'm a disaster in the kitchen.
Placing a pan on the stove, Twilight turned the range on. She opened the fridge and grabbed several eggs in her magic. Cracking them on the edge of the counter, she dropped the yolks into the mixing bowl, tossed the shells into the trash, and began stirring the eggs with a whisk. She added milk and seasoning to the mix as the pan and stove slowly heated up, stirring the contents of the bowl until they were mixed evenly. Satisfied with her egg mixture, she brought the bowl over to the stove and poured it onto the designated pan. As the eggs began to cook, Twilight began gathering the other ingredients she needed. She flipped the eggs over and began to mix another batch of eggs, humming softly as she worked. As the eggs continued to cook, she began adding the fillings for the omelet, knives flashing across the cutting boards as she worked. She placed some fire-roasted peppers and onions across the middle of the omelet, making sure to spread them out evenly. Some diced tomatoes and a few mushrooms followed as the omelet continued to cook. The entire kitchen was soon filled with a pleasant aroma and the sizzle of cooking food. Sprinkling some shredded cheese across the omelet, Twilight folded the edges together, scooped it up, and placed it on a plate. She hovered the omelet-laden plate over to the table as she started another omelet. Twilight had just started on the third omelet when the sound of shuffling footsteps behind her indicated that Max had finally made his way downstairs. She turned and watched as he shuffled across the kitchen and collapsed into one of the chairs by the table. A giggle escaped her lips at his appearance, his hair sticking out in all directions in a severely obvious case of bedhead. His head was hung low, and he had his eyes closed tight, a small frown on his face. He looked reluctant to wake up, but the smell of food seemed to be working against him.
Come on, eat before it gets too cold,
Twilight said as she levitated a glass of orange juice over to him.
We have a big day ahead of us.
Raising his head slightly, Max cocked an eyebrow, his eyes still closed. Twilight deadpanned.
You forgot what we had planned today, didn't you?
Grunting, Max lowered his head and reached for his fork. Twilight shook her head as he began to eat.
We're heading to Candlelight for dinner with my family,
She said, causing Max to begin choking on his food. As he pounded his chest with his fist, Twilight began to eat her own omelet. Why am I going with you? He finally asked, getting his coughing fit under control. Twilight smirked slightly as she took another bite of the omelet.
At least I got him to open his eyes. Because my parents are interested in you.
She replied, sipping at her own glass of orange juice.
That and my brother and Cadence will be there as well. And Cadence wants to meet you personally. Something about seeing what you are really like.
That seemed to alarm Max. His eyes widened and he swallowed thickly. You didn't tell her about me, did you? There was a hint of fear in his eyes as he looked at her.
No, I didn't.
Tyler replied, trying to calm him down.
She's just curious and that this would be the opportune moment to finally meet you.
Max grunted, then returned his attention to his breakfast. Charlie watched him for several seconds as he played with his food.
Are you still against ponies knowing you're intelligent?
She finally asked, placing another bite of omelet in her mouth. Chewing, she watched Max fidget slightly as he continued to stare at his food. Silence filled the kitchen while she waited for his answer. Finally, he looked up at her with uncertain eyes. Are you? For a split second, for the briefest of moments, Twilight thought of pushing the idea for him to reveal himself. She didn't know why he was so scared. Princess Celestia wasn't going to treat a sapient creature in any negative way, even if it was a human. But as she opened her mouth to voice her opinion, something stopped her. It was almost like a whisper in her ear.
It's his decision, not yours.
Thinking quickly, Twilight chose her next words carefully.
I think we should proceed with caution,
She said slowly.
There are certain ponies out there we want to avoid, but I believe that others might handle the information well, if we handle it carefully. I leave the decision up to you, though.
Max was silent for several more seconds before shaking his head. I'm not ready for ponies to know about me yet. I know it's a little paranoid, but I just don't feel ready. Sorry. He smiled sadly at Twilight, his apologetic expression pulling at her heart. Reaching across the table, she patted his hand gently with her hoof.
There's nothing to be sorry about. We can wait as long as needed.
She smiled at him before returning to her food. The rest of breakfast passed in a comfortable silence. When they both had finished with their food, Twilight cleared the table with a quick burst of her magic.
Why don't you go and get cleaned up?
She asked Max, trotting to the sink to take care of the dirty dishes.
We'll be leaving for Candlelight around noon.
Nodding, he stood up and stretched, his back cracking several times in the process. With a yawn, he shuffled silently from the room and headed up to the stairs. Twilight turned her attention to the sink full of dishes. It didn't take long for her to clean the kitchen. Her magic made short work of the pile of dirty dishes, pots, pans, silverware, and cups. The various platters and cooking utensils danced around her as she worked. Some flew into the sink to be scrubbed clean of all offending material, while others disappeared into their proper cabinets and cupboards. She hummed a little tune to herself as she worked. With the dishes done and put away, she placed Spike's omelet in the fridge for later. He would be able to heat it back up with his dragon fire, so she wasn't too concerned about it. Exiting the kitchen, she made her way to the stairs and down the hall. As she passed the bathroom door, it swung open and a cloud of steam drifted out. Max emerged from the bathroom, a towel wrapped around his waist while he dried his hair with another. Other than that, he did not have his clothes that Rarity had made him on. His body was on display for all the world to see. And what a display it was!
Those wrestling matches with Rainbow are definitely doing wonders for his body.
Twilight thought before she could stop herself. One of her wings twitched involuntarily at her side. Lucky for her, Max didn't seem to notice anything amiss. Bathrooms is all yours. He signed as he slipped past her. As he walked by, Twilight noticed that he had shaved off the fur that grew on his face, leaving his cheeks bare. Personally, she liked it better the way it had been. It made him look very attractive.
Wait, what am I thinking?
Blushing, she quickly slipped into the bathroom and closed the door behind her. A quick glance around showed her that Max had closed the drapes of the window, as to avoid any Pegasi that flew by possibly glancing in and seeing him. Flinging open the drapes, she cracked the window open slightly to let the air out of the room. Turning on the water in the shower, she waited for the water to warm up before hopping in. A happy sigh escaped her lips as the warm water washed over her body. Closing her eyes, Twilight stuck her head under the stream of water coming from the shower head, warmth spreading across her face as the water flowed over her fur. She remained under the stream for several minutes, basking in the wonderful feeling coming from the flowing water. Slowly, she began to wash herself as she became lost in her thoughts. Using her magic, she gently began to massage the scented shampoo into her coat, working it into a lather. It was quickly washed away as she stepped back under the shower head.
Why am I getting so flustered by him? I just view him like a brother.
She thought back to the end of the first hellish week he had put her through. How apologetic he had been about what he had done to her. Even more so than Rainbow Dash was when she destroyed several books during a failed stunt. How happily he had subjected himself to her endless stream of questions about his world and the concerns with him living in Equestria, convincing her that everything would be fine as long as they took it slow and careful. How attentively he listened whenever she tried to explain the concept of something to him, paying more attention to her than her own friends do whenever they ask her a question on something they didn't understand. How caring he had been after their run-in with Golden Ingot, how he had risked revealing himself in order to help her, and how he had held her and comforted her as he tried to get her to feel better. How gentle he had been with the Cake's children, despite every pony's fears. How he had gently held Pumpkin and made her laugh. Twilight felt her cheeks begin to heat up, and she didn't know if it was because of the shower or something else.
He's not even a pony. He's a completely different species. Besides, I only love him like I love Spike, right? Like a brother? Right?
I had to record another to make up for the very short You're Human in Hue that I posted the day before. 14 minutes isn't a video length that I really enjoy posting. I just didn't consider the amount of cutoff I had for the last chapter preceding that. However, it is to make up for it. I hope I don't do that again. I usually try not to, but hey, anything can happen. Regarding the story, however, I absolutely love the starting feelings of Twilight. Before we've had, of course, physically attractive Maxes. We've heard that a lot. But now Twi's catching some feelings, and it's just so cute. I think it's adorable, and I love Twilight, especially in this fic. What I also love, however, are my wonderful Patreons. Thank you, my tier 1s. Balance Kindness, Chase Lemaster, Dreamless Portal, Hyperlink, Jason, HK4, aka Texture, Nightingale, Make Carrio, Pony Entertainment, Starlight Plays, and Rain Flicker. My tier 2s, Captain Blueshadow, Chaotic Mist, The Animated Ghost, DJMX 2000, Elemental Wolf, H1 Wolf King, Potato 20, Mr. Crazy Deacon, Mackenzie McColas, Nocturne, Papa Linen, Redeemer of Dark, Solus Eclipse, Sword Within Mordred, Artie Bryant, and Riani Dragon Wolf. A large thank you to my previous Titan tiers, Dark Guardian, Danish Dash, and Maverick. And a large thank you to my current ones, User 1842 and Silent Titan. I appreciate your support so much, and it means a ton to me. That aside, however, this has been Firehearth. Have a wonderful day.